There yet. On day 4, God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth." And it was so. Then God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day. Which one was that? The lesser light to rule the night. Which one was that? The moon. He made the stars also. Do you believe that this happened? Do you believe with all of your heart that God said, "Let there be light," and there was light on day 1? And then on day 4, He said, "Let there be lights," and they were there. Sun, moon, stars. How long did it take for that light to reach the earth? Was it there immediately? Instantaneously. That light was on the earth. How did that happen? I mean, if He just created it, wouldn't it take a long time for that light to reach the earth? Is there any limit to the power of God? I hope that's what we'll be able to see this morning. Some of you hopefully picked up a handout from the table in the back. You don't have to have one, but it gives you something to doodle on while we're going through the class. But as we talk about this morning, the Bible and astronomy, if you had to pick out one of the sciences or a couple of the sciences to look at, astronomy is probably one of our favorites. And what is astronomy? Astronomy is the scientific study of the universe and everything that's in it. Astronomy looks at these objects that are there, the stars, the planets, the nebula, the galaxies, and it looks at their positions where they are. It looks at their movements. It looks at what they're doing and how they're existing. It looks at their dimensions. It looks at how they're distributed and how they're composed. It looks at the energy that is behind all of these planets and these stars, behind these, what's that thing? A comet, I couldn't remember the name of that thing. Halley's Comet. It looks at all of these things that exist in the universe, and it studies these things. This is not astrology. I think some people just get the two mixed up. They're somewhat similar in the name. What is astrology? It's a hoax. It's a horoscope. It's the horoscopes. It's people thinking that the sun and moon and stars have some kind of power over mankind today. That's not astronomy. Used to be. I mean, the two, before man was figuring a lot of things out, sometimes those two things were synonymous. But we're not talking about astrology today. I didn't look at my horoscope this morning. In fact, I've never looked at my horoscope, so I have no idea what it might say, although hopefully something good's going to happen to me today. But that's astrology. Astronomy is looking at these from a scientific, not some kind of a mystical way, but looking at these hopefully in some scientific way to learn from them. Now, the word itself, astronomy, literally means star arrangement. Divide the word in half. You got astron, which means stars. You have nomos, which means law. It's the star arrangement. It's the law of the stars. If you have a law, what does that imply? There had to be some kind of lawgiver, and we're going to get that down at the bottom. The Greeks called the universe the cosmos. What does that word mean? Look it up in a dictionary. You look up the word cosmos in an English dictionary, and it just means an orderly arrangement. What does the word orderly mean? What does the word, to give it a harmonious system, what does the word orderly mean? Say again? It's like regulated. Okay, it's regulated. If something is done decently and in order, what does that mean? It's got a pattern. There's some way that you can measure this. Is there any way to measure the universe? Is there any way to measure the orbits of the planets? Is there any way to measure the distance to stars? That boggles my mind that we can do that. You know, I understand having a tape measure, but mine's only 25 feet long. You know, and here we are measuring a universe. Can you imagine using your 25-foot tape measure to measure the universe? That'd take you a while, wouldn't it? The Greeks called it the cosmos. Now go back. When the Greeks came up with this word cosmos, was that before or after Charles Darwin came up with this idea of evolution? It's before. These ancient Greeks, do you think they had an idea that this universe didn't just happen? You think they had some concept that perhaps there was some design and order behind this? Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 31, speaks of the fixed order. There's an arrangement. There's a pattern. There is a measurement that can be made of these things. And so simple logic says if there's a law, the astronomy, the law of the stars, if that law exists, where did it come from? We have a constitution. Did it just happen? Did it just accidentally fall into place that this land has a law called the Constitution? Or was there a lawgiver behind it? Were there men behind it that created it? That's such a basic, obvious concept to us that we think it's silly to even use that illustration. And yet we have to use the illustration because there are those that recognize there is the law of the stars, but they will not say there is a lawgiver for that law. What is the common view today of the origin of our universe? Where did it come from? The Big Bang. Isn't that amazing? Do you know it takes more, I'll use the word faith. It takes more faith to believe in the Big Bang than it does to believe in God creating the world. You know why? There's not a single solitary shred of evidence anywhere that proves the Big Bang. Don?
In the Big Bang, they cannot tell you where that material came from to start with.
No, they can't tell you where that material came from, but they will tell you that there was a time when all of matter, think about this, that all of matter that was in existence was compressed into an infinitely dense and hot mass. How small was it? It was many billions of times smaller than a single proton. Okay, so I got a proton. How big is a proton? Can't even see it. So all of matter was compressed. Yeah, I would have to say it would have to be compressed, wouldn't it? Compressed into something that was billions of times smaller than a single proton. Why did they pick a proton? I don't know this. What's the difference between a proton, an electron, and a neutron in size? Is proton the smallest? Perfect, good. Why didn't they pick electron then? Why would they pick I don't know. Anyway, it finally exploded. Great. It exploded. This little thing, billions of times smaller than a proton, exploded, and it created all of the order that we see today. That takes a lot of faith and some other words that we could use to believe, doesn't it? If something explodes, what usually happens? I mean, is there a lot of order and arrangement to something when it explodes? It's chaos, but the Greeks called it cosmos, not chaos. Maybe they used the wrong, maybe they just got their letters mixed up, right? Order indicates that there is design, and is the word that what's your name? Nicole used, well-regulated machine. An explosion doesn't make that happen. What if your children were in school and they're reading through their science textbook, and on a page at the very beginning of their science textbook, it said, this book that you are reading that's on your desk is the result of an explosion in a print shop. All the ink was there, the colors, the paper, it was all there, but there was an explosion in the print shop, and now we have this book. What would your kids think? They're reading some kind of fairy tale, right? That doesn't make sense. Suppose they flip the page in that science textbook and they read, and the school that you are sitting in today used to be a lumber yard, except there was an explosion in the lumber yard and it built this school. Does that make sense? That's what the world wants us to believe. That's what these highly educated scientists want us to believe. Folks, we've got a book that tells us where the cosmos came from. We have not just a book, we have evidence. They don't have evidence. Where do you find evidence for all of matter being compressed into 1 billion times smaller than a proton? Where's the evidence? When something explodes, does that give you order and harmony when something explodes? It goes in all directions. You light a firecracker. You lay it on your driveway and it explodes. What is it? Does it create something? Do you know where that firecracker is going to go when it explodes? Do you know where the pieces are going to go? Could you calculate before that firecracker explodes where they're going to go? You don't know where it's going to go. That's the nature of an explosion. There's no rhyme, there's no reason, there's no order, there's no harmony, and yet the planets in our solar system have incredible balance and precision. Is that the result of randomness, or is that the result of design? Think about it. We can believe in the Big Bang, or we can believe that as we look at astronomy, that it is the result of design. This universe has been put together. It's been put together. Well regulated, well managed, well orchestrated. It's all been put together. Finish this verse. The heavens declare what? The glory of God. What do they declare about God? His glory. The firmament shows what? His handiwork. What's handiwork? What does that tell us? That He made it. And there's detail to it. Here are the 2 points we're going to try to grasp as we look at this astronomy design are these two things. That we look at the vastness of the universe and then we look at the organization of it. When you look at the vastness of the universe, how big is the universe? We don't know, is a good answer. We don't have a clue. How did it get so big? The vastness of the universe just shows us the power of God. And then not just the vastness and how huge it is, but then you look at the order. Then you look at the arrangement. Then you look at the organization of it. What does that show us? That there was not just power, but that there was intelligence behind it. Is there power in an explosion? If you don't believe so, go explode something. You'll find out. There's power. Is there intelligence in an explosion? Sometimes, then the explosion explodes whatever was intelligent that was around it. Sometimes you see these implosions of buildings. To take it from explosion, there's the implosion. You ever watch those things on TV and how they design those things and how they spend months and months and months getting that building ready to implode? Does it always work just right? So why do they mark off a perimeter around the building? If they spent months and months and months knowing that it was going to work just right, why weren't they standing at the front door when they pushed the button? Because something might not go right. They might have missed a pillar somewhere. It's unpredictable. And yet we look at our universe, and there's nothing unpredictable about it. The design of the universe, the vastness of the universe is almost beyond our comprehension. Can we number the stars? Have you tried counting them? 150 BC, Hipparchus. If any of you are having children soon, I don't believe that name's been used recently, so you could try that. Hipparchus, in 150 BC, said that there were 850 stars. What a guy. You know, he was one of the respected scholars, I'm sure, of his day, because 850 stars, he must have stayed up late nights, don't you think, counting those? Well, 300 years later, Ptolemy came along and showed him up. Said, no. There's 1,022 stars. He stayed up later, apparently, than Hipparchus did, and found some stars that he didn't. 1,022 stars, and what is that? Just 1,900 years ago. What do you think, 1,022 stars? Does that work for you? The estimates today, notice Ptolemy was not estimating, he had it down to the single digit. The estimate today that is just in the Milky Way itself, there are over 1,000, whatever that is, 100,000 million. That's just a big number. I mean, they could have used any number there and it would have impressed me. 100,000 million stars in the Milky Way alone, and within space as a whole, 100 septillion. That's a 1 with 26 zeros after it, in case you want to write that out. A 1 with 26 zeros. That's how many stars they estimate to be in the universe, in all of space, not just the Milky Way, in all of space. How do you even estimate that? You know, how do you even get to the point where, I think maybe we need to add another zero onto this because I don't think we have enough yet. Trina?
Here's an interesting question. What if all of these were created just to sustain life on Earth? What if everything was put into motion and there has to be this specific gravitational pull and whatever's going on just so that Earth can sustain life?
Well, is that possible? Trina says, what if all of these things, even the vastness of the universe and the stars, what if all of it was created just to sustain life on Earth? You think that's possible? Keep us occupied. It's kept people occupied for a long time, right? I mean, we've come from 850 to 1,022 to 100,000 million. That takes a while to count up, doesn't it, Dirk? Oh, Dirk wants to go to the Bible. That's what the Bible says. The host of heaven cannot be numbered. That was Jeremiah. Was that around when Hipparchus said there were 850? When Ptolemy said, there's 1,022. Did Jeremiah 31 exist? Yeah. Isn't that what God said to Abraham in Genesis 15? Your descendants shall be as the stars of heaven. Oh, so I'm going to have 850 descendants, huh? Nope, you're going to have 1,022. You can't count them. Albert Einstein. Was he a smart guy? Relatively so? Decent guy? You see what he said on the screen. That he said, here's what we know about space. Here's the known area of space. And he said, it could be 100,000 times bigger than that. Have we reached the edge? Have we reached the end and said, okay, that's how big it is? We haven't reached the end of it. We have not reached the vastness of this universe tells us that there was power behind its beginning. And I wish we could spend more time talking about the vastness because it's just amazing to think about. But let's talk about the organization that's there. Let's talk about how orderly the creation of God is. You begin to look at God's creation. Let's start with the Bible this time, Dirk, where the Bible says that God's handiwork, that's Psalm 19. Psalm 8 says that it was the product of His fingers. Can you do more detailed work with your palms or with your fingers? Have you ever tried typing with your palms? You good at that? You're better detail work with your fingers. if you were to have mittens on or if you were to have gloves on with those single fingers, and I know that's a foreign concept here in South Florida. Maybe we should have a class on what mittens and gloves are. But can you do more work with mittens or with gloves? Well, the mittens, they tie your fingers together and you look like a little kid, right? You know, you can't do a whole lot. The firmament, the creation of God, shows that it's a product of His fingers. There's detail involved in creation. It's interesting that Job talked about creation, and depending on what translation you have, talks about how the heavens were adorned, they were garnished, they were formed. It indicates that there was detail involved. Hebrews 11 says that they were framed. You ever seen a house or a building as it was being framed? Dirk, you ever seen one of those? When a house or a building was being framed? Do they just throw that together? I mean, let's just get this done. Let's throw all. It's designed. It's laid out ahead of time. It's measured. It's perfect. Is God's creation perfect? Look at the detail that exists. Look at the design that exists. Our earth, you know, is 93 million miles from the sun. Again, that just boggles my mind that we know that. Because I'm limited to 25 feet on my tape measure, right? 93 million miles from the sun. Is that a good distance, you figure? Is that relatively okay with you? Would you like to be a little bit closer? Would you like to be a little bit further away? I'll stick with 93 million, right? It has worked for as long as I know, right? But it's not just 93 million miles from the sun. The earth is spinning on its axis at 1,000 miles per hour. How do we figure that out? Police officer get out there with his radar gun or something? It's spinning at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. And while it's spinning at the equator at 1,000 miles per hour, it's moving around the sun at somewhere around 70,000 or an average of 66,000 miles per hour in its orbit around the sun. Do these numbers these numbers could be anything and they would overwhelm us, right? 1,000 miles per hour at 93 million miles from the sun, traveling at 66,000 miles per hour in its orbit. And in a, where am I, bottom line? In an orbit year, we will have traveled 595 million miles. Well, that's a long way, isn't it? We get frequent flyer miles for that. We travel in a year 595 million miles. And all the while that the earth is doing this around the sun itself in our solar system is moving at 600,000 miles per hour in its own circuit. It's a wonder we can even stand up straight, isn't it? How does all of that happen? All of that is happening at once, and you and I are not, when we're of good age and good strength, are not falling over very often, are we? All of that, how did that start? How did that start? An explosion? An explosion made all of this happen, and we begin seeing detail. There was another guy who had a halfway decent mind like Albert Einstein. Isaac Newton was able to put into a law this idea that a stationary object remains stationary, doesn't it? If you have a quarter laying on the table, how long will that quarter stay on the table? Until some kid comes along, right? Grabs the quarter. You ever picked up that quarter and put it on its edge and give it a flick? It sits there and spins and spins and spins and spins, and then what happens? Why doesn't it just keep going? Oh, that's another law of thermodynamics, that things are winding down. But that quarter is going to stay there, but if you come along and pick it up and give it a flick, Isaac Newton said that there's a stationary object, and it's going to remain that way unless some force comes along and moves it. So some people have said, well, you know, there had to be some prime mover who started this whole thing. They're right. There had to be some prime mover that started this whole thing. The Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There's your prime mover. There's the one who began everything. You can either believe that God began everything, or you can believe that it started with a random explosion of things that were billions of times smaller than a proton. And now we have all of this order around us. The orbit that the earth is in, you've seen these numbers, these concepts before. There's the centrifugal force that is pushing the earth away from the sun. If you were to take a ball and put it on a string and start whirling it around your head, you get the idea of centrifugal force. That ball, why does that ball go to the very end of the string when you start whirling it? Well, that's the centrifugal force that's causing it to go to the end of the string. So while that is happening, then you've got the sun and its gravity that's pulling the earth back towards the sun. The earth is being pushed because of centrifugal force, but it's also being pulled at the same time. How does the earth stay round? I mean, if you push and pull something long enough, wouldn't it just kind of get elongated? Is this perfect design or what? Some have estimated, again, how they come to this, I have no clue. Some have estimated that the pull of the sun is so strong on the earth that it would take a cable 8,000 miles in diameter to equal that pull, a steel cable to equal that pull that the sun, to be able to support that kind of pull. Interestingly enough, what's the diameter of the earth? Almost 8,000 miles. That's how much the sun, but yet the balance, is it a perfect balance between the push and the pull? How did it get that way? Why doesn't the earth do what your car does sometimes when it gets out of balance? You ever had a tire out of balance? Did you ever notice it when it was out of balance? I mean, once you get up to 80 and 90, you don't really catch on that much, right? But when you're in the 40, 50 mile range, boy, it just really bothers you, right? It got out of balance. Why don't we ever feel that on the earth? Why doesn't the earth just ever jump out of its orbit every once in a while? Wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't you enjoy that? This design not only shows us the designer, but the precision of it, the mathematical precision is boggling. We're gonna run out of time on this. You've seen these numbers before, I'm confident. The earth moves from a straight line. Remember, it's an elliptical orbit. I don't know if we've said that yet. It's an elliptical orbit. What does that mean? Does it look like a quarter, or does it look like an egg? Looks like an egg. It's an elliptical orbit. It means it's not perfectly round. And so in order to maintain an elliptical orbit and not go it deviates from a straight line 1/9 of an inch. Who figured this out? It deviates 1/9 of an inch every 18 miles. It just boggles me that we even know that. But what if it deviated 1/8 of an inch or 1/10 of an inch? What if it was just off a little bit? Why does it deviate only 1/9 of an inch? How did it get to be so perfect? How did the earth, not the other planets, how does the planet that we live on get to be so perfect? I'm sure it had something to do with an explosion, right? I'm sure it had something to do with just some random act. Are you the result of some random, by chance, explosion? It's not possible. That is absolutely not possible. The mathematical precision of our universe has allowed astronomers to accurately predict celestial phenomena. How often does Halley's Comet come around? 86 years? What? 77 years? Do I hear something else? 87 years? Richard, what is it? 75 years. Good. Winner. All right, so, we've seen it, and it's not going to come around in our lifetime, so we don't care, right? We're done with it. How are they able to predict whether it's 75, 77, whatever the number really is, because we don't have a clue, whatever that number really is, how did they figure that out? Why isn't it like 87 one time and, then Halley's Comet takes a vacation the next time and it's 142? We're able to mathematically predict these things. The discovery of the planet Neptune is one indication of this. There were two scientists a long time ago. John Adams, have no clue if he was related to our president or not. John Adams in Britain, and then this guy named Jean something in France. One in Great Britain, one in France. Working independently. They didn't even know about each other, didn't even know the other guy existed. For sure didn't know the other guy was doing the same thing he was doing. But they were observing the patterns of the planet Uranus. And they were looking at Uranus, and they noticed some strange orbital movements in this planet. Neptune, we didn't know about Neptune yet. But they kept noticing these strange things about Uranus, and so they sat down, not with a computer, didn't exist. They sat down with a pen and paper. And these had to be the same guys who figured out we deviated a ninth of an inch every 18 miles, because they sat down and with pen and paper calculated that there must be some other unknown planet out there. The way that this planet, Uranus, is acting in its orbit, there's got to be something else over there. And then we finally invented something strong enough to be able to see Neptune. How did we figure out that Neptune was there? Figured it out because there's mathematical precision to creation. They could sit down and calculate that out. Is that what you get from an explosion? I mean, can you sit down and mathematically figure out anything from an explosion? Not randomness. Our creation shows incredible design. Here's a scientist, a physicist, doesn't believe in God at all, but says it's hard for me to believe that everything out there is just an accident. Seems likely to me that this particular universe that we have is a consequence of something which I would call intelligent. Very good. I'd call him intelligent too, wouldn't you? Why did God, this comes back to what Trina said, why did God make what He made? We have no evidence that there is life anywhere else in our universe. If God created earth and only put living creatures on earth, and He sent His Son to die for the people living on earth, and there's no living creatures anywhere else in the universe, why did He make it? Why do we need the rest of the universe? To prove to these unbelievers that there is something greater than them, that there is a God, that He is alive. Why did God create these things? Why did He create the sun and the moon and the stars? We can't visit them. I mean, I know why He created South Florida so that people could go on vacation, right? I know why He created Orlando so that our state could have some kind of revenue, right? I mean, we visit places on this planet. Why did He create all these other planets? Are you ever going to take a vacation to Neptune? Not in this lifetime, right? Some, again, an interesting thing to do. If you were to draw a map of the universe, try this when you get home with your kids. Sit down with a piece of paper and you draw a map of the universe. You put the sun in the middle and you just move 1 inch out and put the earth. 93 million miles, your scale is 1 inch. If you were to try to reach the next nearest star to us, if on this piece of paper, the next nearest star, remember your scale's 1 inch to 93 million miles. You know how long your paper's going to have to be just to get to the next star? 4 miles long. That's a big piece of paper. Now, we're on the edge of the Milky Way galaxy. If your paper was just going to try to reach the center, not to get to the other side, let's not be crazy, but just the center of our Milky Way galaxy, if your paper was just going to reach that, remember, one inch equals 93 million miles, your paper would have to be 25,000 miles long. Why did God create that? Not the 25,000 mile long paper. I haven't seen that yet. Why did God create a universe that's this big? Does it overwhelm you? Does it say to you that this evolution stuff, no way. Big Bang, yeah, give me a break. Does it say to you that in the beginning God created these things? We don't have time to get through all of these, but in that passage that we looked at in Genesis 1, here's what we see. Man, what do I have, 1 minute? We see that God gave us the sun and the moon and the stars in order that we might have day and night. He gave us the sun and the moon and the stars in order that we might be able to measure our years. He gave us the sun and the moon and the stars. He gave us our solar system. He gave us our planets in order that we might have our seasons, and we have our seasons in order that we might have crops. What if it was summer all the time? What kind of crops would we have? What if we had winter all the time? What kind of crops would we have? That earth tilted at 23.5 degrees on its axis, 23.5 degrees on its axis, spinning at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, revolving around the sun at once a year, gives us the perfect design in order that we might exist. How did that happen? Where did that come from? Did they use the stars as navigational devices? Yes. How could they do that unless they were precisely placed and they were always there? Precision. The constellations Pleiades and Orion are mentioned in Job. And then God used the heavens to teach all sorts of spiritual lessons, didn't He? How could He do that unless they were precisely placed and they were understood? And I'm sorry we've had to run through these last things. But God put all of this there in order that we might know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God is powerful and that God is intelligent. Is He? We use these words. 30 seconds, Johnny? 30 seconds? Good. We use these words for God. He is omnipotent and He is omniscient. What do those words mean? There's no limit. He is all-powerful. He is all-knowing. And there's no way that you can even put it in a capsule. There's no way you can put it into a container. There's no way you can even fit the knowledge and the power of God into our little itty-bitty universe. It's far beyond anything that we even know. Don't have time for that quote. It is an aesthetic. It is a functional creation. And remember, this is not astrology. We're not talking about giving any undue allegiance or worship to these things that God has created. God forbid that, and even those who worshiped the sun, moon, and the stars were stoned in the Old Testament. But what we are talking about is having our faith built up in the realization that when we look at astronomy, it's not going to teach us about the Big Bang. It's going to teach us about God. Thank you all for your good attention this morning.